Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Scouser podcast. It is our regular Monday recording. We are our regular crew minus one. Gally, who's actually traveling back from Anfield right now. He said he just landed in Boston, so he will not be joining us today. You'll probably hear a lot of stories from him on Thursday about this whole weekend. I am your host, Timuchin, as always on Mondays. But we have Bickler because Bickler and I are too poor to be traveling the world, right?
Got that right.
Yes. How are you holding up, Bickler?
I'm good. I may be poor, but I'm not too poor to buy Galley's beverage of choice. So that's here with us, even though he's not.
That will teach him.
A little advertising for the big boys on top of it. We need to start doing like the movies and put duct tape over this so it feels real official. Even though nobody would fucking care, it would make me feel.
There was that bozo, remember, in one of the Facebook groups who was buying the jerseys, but spending the money to buy the jerseys, and then putting duct tape over the Nike logo.
Nothing like a political statement after you give them your money.
So I figured we would talk about, instead of talking about the specifics of the game, make this one nice therapy session for all. Well, especially for us too, but then whoever wants to jump in comments and kind of like tell us where you're at in terms of mindset and feelings and emotions and stuff. You love this therapy stuff anyway, Bickler. You mentioned it more than once, so bring it on. It was a very odd Sunday. High, low, kind of like all over the place. Over here in the corner, if you're watching us video, I put this week Jasmine was graduating from college, so I had that in the entire afternoon, which kind of like adds to the entire emotional roller coaster of the day. But in some ways, it was really nice to have it on the same day to take me away from social media and kind of like brings totally different feelings anyway. So we'll talk about that. So we figured we will go in chronological order. So set the scene for how Bickler is watching this game. Where are you at? I don't even know if I want to know what you were wearing, but let's see. Let's get location.
So nothing too exciting. I was here at the house. All three kids. So I, am Googling how much melatonin is safe at midday for children under the age of 12. No, I'm like shuttling children into the other room with like cookies and shit. So yeah, that's kind of it was a very uncomfortable, chaotic feel to starting that match, which was consistent with last match day of the season. So
yeah, because of Jasmine's graduation, which I'm in Chicago. Jasmine goes to college at University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. So it's kind of like a 2-hour drive. Graduation was at 2:30, I believe it was, when it started. So, or 2 o'clock actually, it's 2 p.m. is when it started. So we're trying to find out logistics. Had family come in from out of town to visit just for basically to attend her graduation, her aunt. So we're trying to do that. And, this is all credit to Angie, knowing my brain would be all over the place if I didn't get the Liverpool into my system in the morning with the game. So the plan was to drive over there early in the morning, literally dump me, almost could have like kicked me out of the car as we were driving by, but I was driving, so couldn't pull that stunt. So I was with the Milwaukee crew, actually, so situated at the pub. And I'll tell you what, as we kind of keep going, I will tell you more, but I really missed having my boy Stitch with me watching a game, which is very odd. I never thought I would, but I was like, man, I wish I was opening the patio door occasionally to let him out right now. I literally felt that at one point. I even texted it out to the family. So we're starting the game. You're over there trying to make the kids pass out. I'm at the pub situated next to some fans, and we start. And it almost feels like the moment we start, we get a goal conceded. So I guess let's start with that. Before the game starts, where is your mindset? Are you optimistic, cautiously optimistic?
Yeah, I am cautiously optimistic. Okay. I would say relax because I know the odds aren't in the favor, obviously, but I am cautiously optimistic because, I've got a close friend that lives over in England, in Wolverhampton area, and he's a diehard Reds fan, and he's one of the more grounded, knowledgeable ones that I know. And he was like, "It's over. City's won it. It's fine. We got Champions League." And I'm like, man, like for me, it's like this is a City team that can drop points whenever they feel like it. Okay, they'll just drop them out of nowhere, and you're looking at a team that is without its starting center back pairing. And the last time they were like that, they lost the league to us by like 15 points. So, like, they were without 3 of their starting back 4. So, like, to me, I'm like, that's a team that's there for the taking. And I don't think that that's a team that is the strongest mentally. I think they do have the ability to turn it on in spurts. Hindsight 2020, we knew that regardless of what happened this week. So I was cautiously optimistic throughout. Yeah, I did go, but I was also very relaxed in knowing that, like, no matter what happened, it didn't change anything for me.
Yeah, so we're on the same page there. I think we talked about this after the FA Cup win. That FA Cup win has totally puts even the warrior that I am at peace. My biggest fear for this team was to chase the quad and that would won. That would make the season not look as successful. So as soon as a double was secured, I feel like, okay, now we can go for the 2 trophies, and it's not like all is at stake, because I felt every trophy we will lose out on would put even more pressure on the team. So I'm content, probably a lot more cautiously optimistic than you are in the caution part, not the optimistic part, because that's how I am. But I was like, hey, you never know. If it happens, it happens. My heart said it could happen. My brain said it probably won't. But we start the game. And really, boom, pretty much we concede right away. Where is your mindset now?
It's funny. I always remembered my travel coach in high school was saying, "Boys, if you're going to concede, at least concede the first 5 minutes." Like, you know what I mean? So, like, I thought, you got 88 minutes to turn it around. With this side, you got to like those odds, and it doesn't change anything. We have to win, like, regardless whether we're down 1-0. And so it didn't change a whole lot to me. I did think it was initially off until I realized it was a goal kick. I'm like fending off kids, and I'm like, oh, it looked off to me. I'm like, I would see it again. I'm like, oh, it's definitely off. And I'm like, oh, it was a goal kick. Yeah. So it didn't make me sweat. I wasn't bothered by going down 1-0. I was like, at least it was within the first 2.
I think it's the same way. My initial thought was, I'm like, oh, the hell with me. I freaking jinxed us again, because one thing I said, as we're driving towards from Chicago to Milwaukee, and obviously Angie gets to follow it whether she likes it or not, because we're so involved with this whole shebang. But I was like, my worst fear would be, both teams losing points. Because all week long, it felt like, it was a given that we would win this game. And we know in Premier League nothing is given. So when we considered the goal, I was like, oh, why did I even vocalize that, bad thoughts in my head was the first thing. But similar to what you're saying, it was like, hey, at least, we got scored on early. So there's a lot of time to come back. So Mane equalizes. And shortly after that, the bar goes nuts. They had several TVs on, because it is a Liverpool bar, but there were some miscellaneous fans scattered around. So, sadly, the one that's closest to me was the Tottenham game. So all I'm watching is Son scoring. And then, but then they had a City game right next to the big screen over there in the corner. So place goes nuts. We find out City is scored on. Where is your mindset now?
So my setup, I'll try to show this to you. I don't know if you can try to see if we can get this in. This is my kind of setup going on. So I'm streaming it on my computer, and I've got the City game actually on the big TV in the background, because to me, that was the most important game. None of it matters when City wins. So I had them both going, and so I saw Villa go up 1. And it like I felt like Dreyfus and Jaws where I'm like, you're gonna need a bigger boat. You know what I mean? I was like, one those probably not gonna get it done. Like so, like especially like 30 minutes in. So I was like again cautiously optimistic. I felt like I was pretty emotionally stable at that point. 37 minutes in, Villa up 1-0, and then we're like, we're drawing. So it was like for me, it was like I don't feel like I was caught up too much in the emotions. I was just like sort of like hedging I think I was cautiously guarded at this point. I was like guarded at this point.
Yeah, it's reminded me, and I said this during the West Ham game when everybody was going like nuts. It's like it's the same thing as us conceding too early. I felt like it's too freaking early. It's too freaking early to be like go over the top with the optimism. That's kind of like nuts. So we come to the halftime, which by the way, this was another highlight of the day, but and a gentleman actually approached me. We're minor celebrities now, Bickler. Would you know it? But and I was actually going around with no hat. So imagine that. And like a gentleman came, and older gentleman said, he has actually been following the podcast, and is like, we do a great work. And he said you're funny, by the way. So I don't know if you meant funny looking. I didn't dig in too much, but
I'll take whatever. I'll take whatever I can get at this point.
He said, like, yeah, he had like a lot of compliments to give, so that was definitely nice to hear at halftime. So we start the second half. The first news that comes is 2-0, and it's instantly reminded me of. So where are you at when you're at 2-0? You see the second goal go in. Of all things, we've been talking about this forever with Phil and stuff like that. Where are you at?
Phil. So first of all, not shocked that it was Coutinho. It's almost like I expected it because, like, I don't know if it was like the like sort of excitement of, oh my God, they got a second, but like the fact that it was Coutinho didn't really register like I thought it would, like at all. It was just like, okay, cool. But I think the thing that really like the feeling that I can remember was like, oh my God, there's only 20 minutes left in this match. 20 minutes. Like, I mean, and, City hadn't necessarily looked dominant either. Like, I mean, they'd had moments in that match, but like Villa was doing a pretty good job of keeping the ball in super safe spaces and sort of mitigating risk throughout that match. So I wasn't like, I think the thing that it wasn't the scoreline that caught my attention. It was the fact there was only 20 minutes left. And that sort of guarded optimism was slowly crumbling away into this like, holy shit. Like, this could fucking happen.
It reminded me of that scene where Michael Scott comes down and is like, all right, it's happening. It's happening.
Yeah.
It's like, that's part of the emotions I'm having. But at the same time, I'm thinking the warrior that I am, who cares? That part of the deal was already set. We got to score over here. I'm watching the game. I'm more worried about that. I wasn't able to watch the game, but my brother is like, we're texting back and forth with him through like WhatsApp. And he's telling me, I mean, it doesn't look like, pretty much similar to what you're saying, doesn't look like, oh, the goal is coming any second or anything like that. So he's like, wow, this is crazy and stuff is like that. What he's saying, I'm like, well, I don't care because I'm more worried at that point. I think that game is going to end like that. This game is going to end like this. And it would be 10 times more painful.
That was crazy because the anxiety swung from City just has to lose to, oh my God, we have to fucking score. Like, because I mean, we didn't necessarily look like we had it either. Like, it didn't look like it was coming. Just basically because I didn't think we necessarily were at our sharpest. And, like, Saad became the second coming of Petr Cech in its prime. So it was like, I mean, it was a combination of like, it was more like, dude, we gotta figure out a way to get a goal.
I think, I was like, man, the cup can suck one in. I think we can get it, but it's never guaranteed. I'm more worried about how painful it would be if we cannot at that point. So, I mean, shit, their goals came fast and furious. So I don't even know if you so just go through with us how you feel after first, second, third. I mean, in the first, I was like, that's fine, whatever. We still got shit to worry about over here. When the second happened, I was like, ah, shit, these guys are gonna come back.
Yeah, I've got a coworker that lives in Raleigh who's a Liverpool fan, and like she basically texted me it just said "shart." That's all it said, and like at that point, I had known that like 2 goals in quick succession had come, and so in the back of my mind, I was thinking either her streams and like very much behind my stream, or they just scored again, and I was like as the text was coming in and I was having that thought, I looked up as the goal was going in, and I just kind of like fucking it's like one of those like deep breathing exercises. I was just like, I mean, it's just like all out because like for me, it was like at that point we had scored, right? So it was 2-1. We had scored previously, and I was just like, you know what? Like part of me was like, at least they won it and we didn't fucking lose it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
like
I exactly where we're at probably because as they're scoring, and this is the time, by the way, where we're not able to score while it's like 2-0 and like we're kind of like going for it, is where I was like, man, I could have used Stitch right now. And it's odd because he's normally an annoying distraction / presence because he's nervous around me as I'm pacing. Like, like he gets bored after a while. He'll go knock on the patio door for me to open it. I was like, bro, like go over there, open it, let him out and stuff like that. But I was like, man, those distractions were really actually freaking helping my sanity. Because, when you're watching in a bar, it's almost like that insanity is combined with others. So, and then you get some like overreactions from some people that's like kind of like sometimes like agitates me at the same time. I was like, oh, I wish it was just with Stitch right now because I would be in a better place mentally watching that. But as they come back, I think that's where I was at too. Because to me, maybe the worst case scenario was like you're saying, they're dropping the ball, but we are too, because I feel like that would have been 10 times more painful. So we score, we get the leads. I don't know. Obviously, like once our game ended, all the TVs switched to City. And I think like actually NBC might have switched everything because the Tottenham game was over, which I don't even know why they were playing after a certain time over there. But and you kind of see it. And I know everybody was like, oh, why are they not extending time? It would look like a beach. Every City player was like laying around and stuff like that, getting soaking the sun. And so the game ends. The finality is there. Where are you at mentally then?
So I closed everything, shut everything down, mostly because the kids at that point were just fucking peeling the paint off the walls and ready to go do something. No, like that is true, but
medication is wearing off or what?
Yeah, like I had like sedated them as long as I could. They were waking up from the chloroform and stuff. But no, seriously, like I couldn't. I shut everything down. I didn't want to see that, man. Like I didn't want to see, like. I have a lot of respect for City. I think they're like a monster. I think they're a phenomenal footballing side. I think they represent everything that's wrong with modern football in a lot of ways. I do think they have some quality players that I'd love to have. Cancelo, Rodri, KDB, those are amazing players to watch. And I think genuinely good people. I also think they have a ton of knuckleheads on that team that I wouldn't want anywhere near Liverpool. I just didn't want to see the likes of Bernard Silva and Foden walking around with medals. And like, I just wasn't, I wasn't in a spot where I could watch that. I shut everything down. I allowed myself like 30 minutes to feel bad about it. But then like, I think I probably put it in the Discord before I felt it. But I really thought, like going into the day, we said this was one of the greatest seasons ever, no matter what happened. And nothing changes that. And we went in today knowing that, like, statistically, we were a long shot to pull through today. And the only thing that changed us feeling that way in the course of the day was how it unfolded, not the final result. If we would have seen that result in the morning, we would have all accepted it. We would have all been like, we kind of expected that. But, like, it's just the way that it unfolded, the dramatics and the theatrics throughout the day, which make, the last day of the season some of the best sporting – that was, like, the best sporting day of almost anything. Like, to see that.
So wait, before I switch over, let me ask you this: like, do you normally call me a sore loser? I turn it off in any event, regardless of who the other team is. Like, okay, let's say I'm trying to remember. I guess the last time would be losing the Champions League final. Like, do you watch it afterwards in general? Because usually, like I say, call me a sore loser, I shut everything off.
Just depends on the team, you know.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it depends on the team. I'll sit and watch some of it. I did in the Real Madrid game. I did not. Just because I was like, that was a tough one for a number of reasons. The most situation, Karius, it was just tough in general. But yeah, sometimes I will. I mean, it just depends. I'm okay with losing. I don't like it, but like somebody has to do it. It's sports, you know what I mean? Like it is what it is. It just depends on who it's to and what it is.
And that's why I kind of like, before the podcast, I asked you, like, should we go in time order? Because I feel like, like before the game, I even told this to Angie. I'm like, man, I don't have to watch this game. Like, if you guys, don't want to do all that and leave earlier and stuff like that, I can follow it on the phone or watch it over the phone and stuff like that. And I said, in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm at the pub. If 15 minutes in, City is up 2-0. There's no reason for me to be here. I can hop on the Uber and meet you guys for lunch, But yeah, I had literally had the Uber ready to go as we were watching. And the moment the final whistle, I was like, confirm. Like, I just called it so I can go meet him. And I just kind of like caught the end of their lunch and stuff. But, and you're right. We did say regardless, right? Yeah. So why do you think especially in a lot of ways, the overreaction, and then like people trying to find that overreaction with perhaps underreaction? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, there's people that see the fact that we have one league title in the last 5 years of pretty large dominance and like are frustrated by that. You know what I mean? And can't see past that. And I think there are other people that see the larger picture, but maybe don't see that other people see it differently. And so I think I just think it's the way that people react in general. And it's like, you got one set of fans like that are like, this is the greatest era ever. We should just enjoy that. And that's the camp that I belong in. I don't necessarily feel like I need to react to somebody that says like the Premier League's everything. We've won it once in 5 years. That's disappointing because like I respect that. Like I do think like, Pep said it and we all kind of shit on it this week, but I still agree with it because we've talked about it on the pod. I think the Premier League is the hardest thing to win. I think it is the hardest thing to win. And like, so maybe Pep's saying that because that's the only thing they're going to win this year, but he's not wrong. Over 38 weeks, I think it is the most grueling campaign. Like, and I'm not going to downplay the Champions League because like people are like, oh, we got basically Europa like opponents. It's like, dude, we had the group of death going in. Like everyone said that was the hardest group by far. And then we got like we got teams that beat Juventus and Ajax. Like, I mean, are you going to blame us for the fact that Villarreal ran through those teams? Yeah. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to downplay either way. But I do think there's some credence to the importance of the Premier League plays, and I get that. What I think is funny is when people get online and be like, "Don't tell me how to feel." Like it's all right, guys.
It was a lot of fighting about that. That they're like, "No, you should be crying right now, or you should
crawl under your stool and go to sleep." Like, I mean, it's like my thing, and I think that's my thing. Is like, dude, like, and I said this online, like, so somebody's like, oh, people process grief differently. I'm like, what fucking grief, dude? Like, I mean, that's my thing. Like, not to get deeply personal, but like, I've gone through some severe heartache in the last 5 years, whether it was losing a parent, whether it was losing my marriage. Like, and I think like when you process real grief and you go through real grief, and in a lot of ways, Liverpool saved my life multiple times by it being the only positive thing going in really bad situations for me. Like, I think it's very easy to lose like track of like the big picture and understand like, dude, this is such a phenomenal season. There is absolutely nothing to grieve this year. Does this team deserve to win the Premier League? Probably. Like, do I think we're better than City? Probably. Yeah. I do. But I mean, you got to tip your cap to City, and they did what great teams do. They found a way to win. Like, that's what great teams do. And I just think, like, when people are like, oh, you know, like we're processing, I'm like, dude, guys, let's fucking get over it. Let's look at this thing collectively as a whole. Let's look at the season with some actual perspective.
And honestly, that's the thing. So like, and that's like your personal stuff, and I'll go like through my personal stuff because I felt like, you know, that really actually helped me put things into perspective. Because, you know, normally if I didn't have anything rest of the day, I would probably still avoid social media. And it's kind of harder, obviously, for us with American Scots or the website, and there's a bunch of stuff happening and postings and articles going up and stuff like that. So while you're doing that, while you're sharing something, you can't look away. It's like a traffic accident. You see like somebody's like brainless post, and you know, I try to like scroll down now. I try not to respond when I see like certain things, but you know, having that graduation like really helps because from there, like I said, went to lunch. We went there. Parking was a bitch, but you know, we eventually go there. You know, like we're kind of like waiting. You sit in the stadium. You know, like I mean, there's like a freaking like 1,000 students, and it's odd. Your little ones are still little, so the old farts listening to me will probably understand this a lot more. But when they graduate from things like, I don't know, like kindergarten and stuff like that, it's freaking cute, right? you're like, oh, you made it another year, good job. And then when they do like, you know, same thing probably with elementary school, you know, because these are given things. Yeah, you better in some ways, but it's cute, you know, like you said. High school graduation, it's still, you know, all these are like proud moments, but the pride and the emotion that goes with the changes. Like high school graduation, you're like proud, and then you're like so hopeful for them because, you know, like it's like that feeling that you can kind of feel their hope and like the opportunities they have and stuff. I mean, she's gonna go to college and things like that. When the college graduation happens and these things get level, and she's doing masters now, so God forbid, it's a lot more emotional. Not like,
yeah, because your retirement's going out the window.
Oh, but that's part of it. I mean, not like Angie emotional, where, you know, as she's already starting to like cry as we sit down. I'm like, dude, there's 45 minutes to go. Not like I brought my own pack of tissues emotional, like Angie is, mind you. But, you know, as that happens, it's emotional because not only like the pride keeps obviously accumulating as you go, but it's also like, oh man, like you can kind of like feel them get, well, fucking feel yourself getting older, but then them getting older and like having their own life more and more and more. It's kind of like a mixed emotion thing. If you ever had a kid graduating from college over the years, if you're as old fart as I am, you'll probably relate to this. When your kids eventually get over the whole chloroform and being excessive NyQuil that's being given to them,
they're still waking up. They'll be fine.
You will probably be there too, and you'll have a hat trick of experiencing this 3 times. But yeah, it's so much pride and it's so much joy, and it kind of put things into perspective where I felt like that was just another thing. I mean, we're obviously very invested in this, not only because we're like hardcore fans, but with the website and stuff. You know, our lives, half our lives, if not more, revolves around this. You know, but you kind of like puts everything else into perspective in a way, and you're like, hey. You know, I think I was able to process it a lot better. Yeah. The one thing that I did not like, because I was kind of like looking at the Facebook as we're waiting, because everybody's sitting down, blah, blah, blah. Like I said, we were there. By the time we sat down, it was like 20 minutes to go. Is I saw some social media posts and I was like, you know what? I'm glad I'm not in this mess right now. I'm kind of like enjoying this. One thing I didn't like, and I think I've talked about this before, I want to get your take on it, is as a fan, I don't want to say as a fan base, it's probably not fair. Is, you know, we kind of like overreact to how City's thing is similar to what you said with what Pep said. I think if anybody asked any given point, I think we would say winning the Premier League is harder, just because it's a longer freaking marathon. First of all, right? Not only because of the teams you're gonna play, but it's a lot better to. I mean, clearly, when we came back and beat AC Milan, that Milan team was like a ridiculous team. was a much better team, and nobody can deny that, right? But you can have 8 or 10 really good days, and you focus on that and kind of like push the league away, and you're able to do that a lot easier than run this marathon with the league. And not only that, I feel like whenever we all know, and we've known that City's money and how they cheat, the FFP and all that kind of stuff, this was all a given thing. When we start bitching about it, the moment the result doesn't go our way, I feel like it's comes across as very like sour grapes. I feel like it's when you play your older brother, and when you beat him, you mock him to death, which I did, but that's how I roll. But the moment you lose, you say, "Oh, you were supposed to win anyway. You're older than I am." Does that make sense? I just don't understand. I feel like
no, it totally does,
like
and I think I think it's just human nature to find reasons to try to justify why you weren't the one that won, right? Like why you weren't the number one, why it wasn't you, why you weren't chosen, like for anything. And I think that's just life in general. And I mean, like, God, dude, like, I don't want to get into it. I do think that City did have an awful lot of VAR decisions go their way this year. But that being said, if you start going down the what if train, like you can get into so many, like, I mean, what if City would have like won any of the games they drew? Like, what, you know what I mean? And like, you got to understand, like, what it comes down to for me is when I look at City, up until last week, they hadn't dropped a single game from a winning position. Like, they haven't dropped a single point from a winning position since, like, that's almost the entirety of the season, okay? Like, they were just that fucking good. And I don't think any of us want to talk about it because, like, I mean, we don't necessarily agree with the way that team has been put together. And that's at the core of the issue for me is how they've done their business. But when I look at the team, they were just that good. I mean, like, we can't say that. We dropped loads of points from winning positions. We drew a lot of games. But that being said, like, it is a hard thing to reconcile the fact that we have, in the last 5 years, tallied 99 points, 97 points, 92 points, and walked away with one Premier League trophy. Manchester United has 13 trophies at 91 points or fewer. You know what I mean? So, like, I mean, that is hard. That's a hard thing for me to reconcile. This season is so awesome and so important to me because that was my biggest fear. My biggest fear is that United's going to hang their hat on 13 Premier League trophies at a point total of less than 3 of our last 5 years, and we're going to have 1. And this team was going to be buried in the history books by a City team that's been basically artificially like constructed in such a way to be a monster. This season is so important to me because we are clean sweeping everything else. Fingers crossed, Champions League happens. Like, this should be considered one of the greatest sides of any Premier League era. And that's important to me. That's really what, like, I hang this season on. But I do think we just need to look at the City side and like, tip our hat to them collectively as to what they are. Like, they did what good teams did. They found a way to win, and they've done it all year.
And I think that's why, we talk about the league being more difficult because it's more about consistency and, being able to do it week in and week out, despite what else is going on. And, Parto says, for example, and I realize this, and I think we talked about this, the VAR. I almost feel like trying to put the title loss in a specific moment makes it almost more painful for me. Before it was like the 0.11 inches or whatever the heck that ball was. You can go to the VAR thing, but then I think that's what, if you do that, it's more painful. I don't think you can
do that. I don't think you can do that because if you're going to do that, then you have to look at every moment during the league campaign and dissect every moment. And there are hundreds of them. Yes. There are literally hundreds of them. So it's like, yeah, the handball, that was brutal. And that was a brutal call. Like, when it happened, we talked about it the week that it happened. And I told you, like, I was like, this is going to come down to the wire as a title race. You remember this. And I was like, I'm going to be so upset if this comes down to the last.
I remember this, dude.
And, like, I told myself I wouldn't do that to myself because, like, we look at it, there's 100 things that go either way. And at the end of the year, how many go their way versus our way? It's probably close to 50-50, to be quite honest. When you look at it, if you dissect all the hundreds of moments through the year, I just think it's a too big of a rabbit hole to go down. At the end of the day, to me, like the statistic that they didn't drop a point from a winning position up until the last 2 weeks of the season, to me is the one that sticks with me because that's dominant.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's doing it to a specific moment is just not really fair. Well, for your own mental health, for one,
Yep.
and that's why the league. I mean, and that's I saw that the same thing done with us, like in terms of the team's performances. But if they beat Tottenham, okay, then if they beat every game, then maybe it would just be goal difference if both teams. That's why it's hard. I mean, it's impossible to win every freaking game. I think we're kind of spoiled with starting every game with the expectation of a win by itself was not a thing 5 years ago.
And we got dudes on this team that we bought 3 years ago that haven't lost a game yet. Like, it's insane.
It is.
Like, some of the statistics that are coming out of this side are like just insane statistics.
And I think that's kind of like what has kind of spoiled us. And like I say, like Jasmine's graduation, which Jasmine is up there. She was always up here somewhere. Hold on, let me point it right here, playing soccer, but now she's graduated over there. And that whole graduation was able to kind of like keep me calm and kind of look at the bigger picture, better perspective, and say, like, kind of like brought me back to the beginning of the day in some ways, where we were almost like expecting it, only hopefully cautiously optimistic. It's like I say, it's the hope that kills you. If it wasn't for that 2-0, it would not be that painful. Right. That is why, I mean, it's the hope that kills you. And that's why I was kind of like what you were saying. I was like, I hope they freaking win, because if they do not win, when it was 1-1, I'm like, they better fucking win. Otherwise, I'm going to be even more upset. I think then I would be crushed, because it would almost be more about bottling it than.
Oh, for sure.
Right? And it would
yes,
be like
100%. And I said this in Discord. When City scored their goal, I said, well, at least they won the title and we didn't lose it. Because like that was it. Like I was like, oh my God, dude, if this thing ends in a draw and City loses, I will just like that would have ruined my day, my week, and probably my month worse than like it would have been far worse than what happened.
Chris Trey makes a good point. I mean, it's the butterfly effect. Everything that happens affects everything that follows. So if you change that incident, you don't know if, how City approaches games are different. I mean, everything can change. I know it's a lot easier for some of us, I guess. Like I say, it makes it more painful for me if I try to pinpoint to a specific moment in time and blame that or a specific game, because that's the whole point. It's like the marathon. I mean, it's not like. And that's the butterfly effect goes into that, because you don't know what's going to happen. And that's Darren kind of say, we can't do the ifs or buts, because that's, I mean, part of the joy of the game, I guess. And I think it goes back to what you're saying in terms of the disappointment of doing so well, yet not having the titles for it. That's why the FA Cup.
I mean, isn't that why we added VAR? It's just so we could have another layer of ifs or buts? I mean.
Which is what it has done in that sense, I guess. But I don't know. That's what we'll definitely have a podcast where we talk about VAR during the summer, because I think it has gotten better than what it was when we talked about it last summer, for example. But there's still like a lot of issues, and we'll discuss that. But so now that the dust has settled, where are you at with the season as we head over to the Champions League final?
I still think it's a great season. I still think it's one of the best ever, and I am desperate for a Champions League win. And I'm hoping that this team, is processing losing the league in a dramatic way, and it's channeling and fueling a fire for this final.
Will the result of that game change how you view the season?
It didn't. It didn't.
No, I mean the Champions League final. I'm talking.
Oh, how does it change how I view the season?
Will it change?
Will it change? Yes, it will. I will think it was a great season, but I won't think it was a historic season. I will think it was historic in the fact that we made it on all four fronts and we competed on all four fronts. But I think, to me, like, I would say 50% of it is having to win one of the big ones, and that's either the Champions League or the Premier League. Those are the two. Those are the two big ones, and I think like winning one of those will solidify us like in the history books.
I agree, because even though I do say the FA Cup win puts me at ease, I would be. I don't know what it is, man. It must be this whole graduation emotional thing. I'm a wreck. But like I felt more at ease and I was okay with it. Maybe because like how Chris says, like calm before the game, because we felt like there was nothing to lose. It almost felt like it was already lost and maybe we'll snatch in the last second kind of deal, as opposed to obviously the final where it's up for grabs. Honestly, when the game ended, I was more upset that we had already lost, but now we lost Thiago.
Yeah.
That was more like injury to the insult, I guess, the other way around. But it just, that was my bigger disappointment. Like, we had already lost, but at least we had Thiago now.
Yeah,
I know it's going to be more determined, but you would think as we go into the final and talk a bit about that he would not. I mean, he would not be in the 11 for sure, even if he's able to come off the bench, right?
I mean, that's how it's looking. I read something that said like they're gonna not know until within 48 hours of the match. But I mean, I gotta believe the way that he looked and the way he went off the pitch. Like, I just can't imagine. He's not one that ever beats a timetable to come back either. So, like, we'll see.
But I don't know if that's sometimes based on you don't want to bring him early and lose him for even longer. Whereas this one is like and that's what I was going to ask you. Like, in terms of, because it's what's the worst case scenario, plus the fact that you can make 5 substitutions, do you roll the dice? If he says I can go, do you roll the dice, or you're like, you know what? Why don't we play it safe? Because we don't want to substitute you like 5 minutes into it when you realize you can't, and put you in like 60 or whatever.
That's so hard, man. That's so hard. I would almost roll with Naby and then introduce him at 50 or 60 in, depending on how the game's in. Like, maybe you introduce him at halftime if you're really struggling in the midfield. Like, if you're struggling in the link-up play, in terms of if you're struggling to get the ball out of the mids into dangerous positions, maybe you bring him in at halftime. But like, I almost think like you're basically playing from a position of strength if you can bring him into the game versus whether you start him and like either have to pull him out halfway through, because he can't make it.
I think so too. The only concern over there and the only question is, I mean, we're assuming Fab is in there. So it's Fab and Hendo, and we're looking for the third. The last time we saw Keita against that Real Madrid midfield, obviously it was not pretty. Not fair on him because he did not have the run-on games, and I felt like he was kind of thrown under the bus by being out there. And I remember back then when we talked about
I'd forgotten about that. That's a great point. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, I mean, but even then I felt like we put that more on Klopp than Keita in terms of he just was not ready in terms of physically and perhaps emotionally, like the magnitude of the game. Do you think that affects his mindset, perhaps in a positive way, that he has something to prove now? Because I'm sure he freaking remembers that game, because Klopp does not yank you very often. Usually you trot out there even in the beginning of the second half, and he gives it till 60 and you were full.
Yeah, the thing that, I mean, that always just comes down to the individual, right? I mean, I think that you can either turn that into something that makes you fight harder, or you can turn it into something that becomes fear. And like, this feels so unfair to say to Naby, but like, I feel like sometimes Naby is easily rattled, if that makes sense. And like, so like, I worry about that coming into play, but I don't know. It's such a different situation, and it is a completely different cast of characters that's around him right now. Even though it was such a short time ago, like, man, that's a coin flip. I could go either way, but I still think you go Naby. And I still think you bring Thiago off the bench for it. That's how I would roll.
I agree. And for the front three, are we doing the Diaz, Mo, Mane? Or are you putting Bobby in there?
I think you have to go Diaz, Mo, Mane.
Okay.
Mane middle, Diaz left, Mo right, obviously. I think you have to. I think that's your best lineup and has been for the last better course of a month and a half, and I think you have to roll with that.
Sparky Parpy says Bobby. I am torn on that because I am not sure who you're replacing. The only thing that concerns me about Real is especially like Vinicius on the left hand side going against Trent. Like defending on that side is going to be key. And that's probably like my bigger concern. I know obviously like Benzema is in like ridiculous form and stuff like that, but I feel like we can handle him with the center back duo as
The
long as
problem,
we
I
stop
love
the
Bobby, and I think like he would probably add so much to a game like this where we're going to need help in the midfield. The problem that I have with Bobby is if you start Bobby, that means you're benching your hottest player for the last 2.5 months. That means Diaz is sitting. You're not benching Mane in this situation. You're going to go Mane, Bobby, Mo. And for me, it doesn't make any sense. Diaz has been the lifeblood. He's basically grabbed this team by the back of the neck and dragged it across the line the last 2 months. I just do not see a situation where you bench Diaz.
That is a good point. I mean, especially like in terms of like how you're explaining what he has done, because he has done that in terms of especially like energy wise on the field. You can kind of like feel that. The only case as a devil's advocate that I am would make for Bobby is the fact that you're gonna get more from Diaz coming off the bench that you would bringing Bobby off the bench is how I feel. But it goes if I weigh those two, I'd probably go with what you're saying and start Diaz out there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like for me with Diaz, like I'm not asking for 90. I'm asking for 60 of like full throttle heavy metal Diaz, and then I'm looking at Jota to create some magic off the bench, or Bobby to come in. So I mean, Bobby, I think coming in with 30 minutes to go changes the complexion of that in a big way. It creates more space up top. It helps out the midfield and when the legs are starting to hit. I think it makes a lot of sense in that regard. Man, I got big concerns for Mo in this match. I know everybody's like, this is his revenge tour versus, Madrid. Like, I am so happy he bagged that goal. My biggest concern about this match with Mo is that we're sitting watching 90 minutes of Mo try to beat 6 guys. Like, that's my biggest concern. So, I don't want to like speak that into existence, but I just like we're in the nest, and I feel like I just need to verbalize that fear out loud. Get it out.
Yeah, that is a concern. But in some ways, part of me says you're gonna get like a ridiculous Mo. It's almost like the moment he's been waiting for, and he might force some things, but at the same time, I think you have a Madrid team expecting a ridiculous Mo, which will probably pay him even more attention. That will open up space for others. That will be their top concern. I think this is going to be a huge game for Mane, actually, because when you look at this team right now, and I know Mane is scoring some goals, but you're so worried about. In the past, you would be worried about Mo and Mane, right? And now it feels like you will be worried about Mo and Diaz just because of his recent form and what he's done, which leaves a guy that you would normally worry about, like Mane, not as worried. Will he be able to take advantage of those spaces? I just hope so. I'm more worried about the counter and their speed on the wings than anything else. That midfield, yes, it's solid, but I think we will be able to bypass it with our speed because it's a slow midfield. That's where Thiago would be golden. Like I said, that was my probably biggest disappointment over the weekend is just not having Thiago for this game because that would be defining. Chris Strain says, apart from the fact that his autocorrect is killing him, that getting the goal for Mane was huge. For Mo was huge, and I think so. It does kind of like help the cause. So let's get a prediction from you.
Oh God, this is brutal, huh?
Yeah, it is.
I'm going to go 2-1 in a nail biter. I think it's going to be one late. I think it's going to be one dramatically. I'll go 2-1 Reds.
Man, Sparky Parky says 3-1. That's what my heart says as well. I do say 3-2 though, with a 3-1 becoming a 3-2 towards the end, where they get ridiculously happy and think they're getting yet one more comeback, but not this time.
Look at all these predictions coming through. You guys are optimistic.
They are optimistic. Well, okay. Chris Strain says 4-1 and 3s up at halftime. I am not falling for Chris Strain's tricks, man. Every time he does these predictions, puts me at over ease. Yeah, I'm more like Alan Walnut, who says I'll start praying now. Yeah. I'm going to tell Jasmine, see if she can wrap up the master's program in like a week, so that worst case scenario, I'll have another graduation to attend or something like that, because I might need that. And it would definitely save some money, I guess, huh? Any parting thoughts, Bickler?
No, like I don't have the kids on this game, which I kind of wanted for the distraction. So I'll be under a bridge drinking at like 8 a.m. trying to get myself through it.
I will have Stitch back in the starting lineup coming up from like.
I need to get a service dog. That's what I've been doing wrong this whole time.
And you know what the funny thing is? We've talked about this before, and I don't know how this works. Like, you see these service dogs, and sometimes you see golden retrievers. And I was like, who is training these guys? Because Stitch is like the anti-service dog. He's like a disservice dog, where he's more excited than you will ever be at any given time. But I think those distractions, are helping me watch. So I'm definitely watching home. Are you going to be at the bar breaking your hand again?
I will be down at Duck and Dive, hopefully not breaking my hand this time.
So what came out of that, by the way? It's always off camera, I noticed. But
it's good. It's fine. I think it was just a broken blood vessel. It still hurts quite a bit, but it's fine. Yeah, so
I been to the doctor, or is this like a self-Bickler? Or you ask the kids, you guys think this is a broken vein before you guys?
Dude, do I look like the type of dude that does doctors? Are you kidding me? Like, yeah. So I'll be at Duck and Dive down in Wilmington, North Carolina. Should be a good time. It's gonna be crazy. There'll be loads of us out there.
Yeah, Parto says 3-2 for me. I'll have extra blood medication on hand. Yeah, there is no way. And Chris Strain says, and I was watching that afterwards, that Jamie probably had a bruised eye from that day that he didn't even remember either afterwards. But you boys have fun. Alan says he'll be at Ron's Pub in Houston with a couple of hundred people. Like you say, I love the excitement of that, but man, it was like an awesome.
Alan, send us a vid, man. Let's see it.
Yeah.
Send us a video.
Yep. No doubt. No doubts. Well, thanks everybody.
Yes, that's accurate.
Elbow. Yeah, Jamie is probably the cause of that after all. But well, thanks to everybody who's listening. We will be back next week, hopefully with number 7. I'll have a big 7 in the corner instead. And on Thursday, Gally will be back with his Anfield stories. It's going to be like that. Gather around, people. The old man has stories kind of an episode. We'll be joined by a couple of our contributors, and they will do a final preview. My heart won't take that. By then, so do you follow stuff, by the way, Bickler? Or like on game day, for example, will you be watching everything? Because I avoid anything and everything on game day till kickoff usually. I just don't want to hear it, know it, see it. Just show me.
Yeah, I think I nervously skim through Facebook stuff, which I probably shouldn't do because I'm just not in the best frame of mind to begin with. But I don't watch a whole lot of TV coverage of anything at all. No
that explains a lot of your comments on those days, by the way. Yeah, you should definitely avoid social media. Chris Strain says, I'm watching everything I can get. I do not, because more often than not, it's aggravating, and it becomes the sports media that I really hate, like trying to pull stories out of their ass or embellish all these stories. I think in terms of Liverpool, we know all the storylines. So just give me the game. I'll probably avoid everything. I might even mow or something just to get my mind out of the game. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. Give us a follow. Definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as we're going to be launching a lot of new stuff coming up. And up the Reds. Hopefully we'll be back next Monday with number 7. Take care, everybody.